Hey everybody, welcome to Unite for Inclusion. My name is Melinda Jennis, and this week we're going to talk about how inclusion is so much more than just achieving awareness. In today's world, I think not to understand what inclusion is at all would be very difficult. We have been educated for many years in schools, through our newspapers, through our media, through movies, through books, and even social media. My goodness, every day we have very descriptive, very graphic videos and photographs and stories about inclusion or exclusion or discrimination and supremacy. In fact, we are bombarded with it. And so my question would be is how much awareness or how much more awareness do we need before we start to take action? I do a lot of training in the state of New Jersey in schools and have trained about 49,000 children about inclusion. And many times I'm asked to do sensitivity trainings, especially for people with disabilities and kind of educating people about them. And I go into schools and some of them I'll do, a 2-week period where I will train an entire grade level. Now, these sensitivity trainings are 90 minutes long. They're intense and it's a lot of role playing, a lot of, critical thinking, and, they'll go through a lot of different stations to feel what it's like to have a special need. And then what they'll do is they'll have to, use something to try to solve the situation or to try to make it more inclusive. So I would say that in some of those schools, we do a pretty good job of making those children very aware of what they can do to include people, particularly with disabilities. Now, in some of these places, I'm in gymnasiums doing trainings, and in between the trainings, they'll bring in some kids that will do gym classes or whatever while I'm sitting there. And every year I see a class of about 8 to 10 children, just like right after I'm done with the training. And they'll walk in, and there'll be children that have fairly severe disabilities. Now, granted, I have just trained maybe, 30, 40 kids in a gym class to include people with disabilities. And yet these children with disabilities that come into this gymnasium are in an adaptive phys ed class with absolutely no other child that does not have a disability in there learning anything about them or actively taking what they've just learned and applying it, to something like this. I mean, if you think about it, here you have this gym right here with about 10 children with severe disabilities, and in the gym next door, you have maybe anywhere between 30 to 50 children without disabilities who have just taken an awareness training. What happened? Why are they still segregated? And every year I ask the same question and I get the same answer. We're working on it. You're working on it for 8 years? When you start to come to the point where you've got to ask yourself that are we using awareness as something that just kind of prolongs the inevitable of taking some sort of action that's going to change and make a child feel more included? We've got to start thinking about the fact that, these trainings are wonderful, but there's got to be some sort of a call to action. There's got to be something that, is taking the training that these children are receiving and it's turning it into something that is truly becoming something that changes lives. Maya Angelou, I love her and I love her poetry. I love everything about her. And one of the things that she says is when we know better, we do better. Well, sometimes we don't. And then what happens? When we're giving this amount of training, something should be happening. And these 10 children that are in this gymnasium should not be alone. And even if it's to take small steps, where you take a few kids from this gym class over here without disabilities and you bring them in to work with some of the children and to work with some of the adaptive phys ed teachers and some of the phys ed teachers, that don't work with children with disabilities, you bring them together and you start, problem solving. What could we do to make this a little bit more inclusive? You don't have to right off the bat take all of the children and put them all together. It's doing it correctly, but it's taking action. And my challenge to you is, think about the sensitivity trainings that you're doing. Think about the books that you have children reading, the papers you have them writing, the movies you have them, looking at about inclusion, any kind of inclusion. And how are they applying it? Not just are they learning about it, because knowledge within the head that just stays there dormant is a dead end. And I believe we can do so much more. I believe that when we know better, we could do better. And so my challenge this week to you is, how much more awareness do we need? Let's keep becoming more aware. But please take this as a challenge and take that knowledge that you have got in your head and put it into some sort of inclusive action. Go out tomorrow. Include someone. Go out today and apply what you know in a small way even, just to take one step closer. I think that there's no greater tragedy to me than to have people that have that potential. They have the knowledge. They have the know-how, but they're not taking it and turning it into something that's viable, that will get a real actionable outcome. Below, just write a few sentences about what you've done and how you've taken what you know and turned it into an action that has made a difference in somebody's life.